Hello and welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute-a-day podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse, recorded here in the dining room of the Bible Bistro, located in Sharonville, Ohio. Hey there, friend. Welcome back to Daily Dose Radio here in the Bible Bistro. Well, we're going to look today at verse 5 in Psalm 87. It's a wonderful verse. And we've kind of in this stream of thought about those that are born there. So when we think about that, especially here in the Psalms, when we have the psalmist using this idea of being born someplace, of course, for the believer, we always go right back to John chapter 3, because for John, it was so important about being born again. We find it in his gospel. We find it also in his epistles that he wrote. This idea of being born of God is so important. It's important to John. And when we read this, immediately we think of him because of the way he emphasized it. And so we're going to talk about that today. We've already breached that subject yesterday in verse 4, but we're going to do it again today in verse 5. Okay, so let me read for us today verse 5. And of Zion it shall be said, this and that man was born in her, and the highest himself shall establish her. Now you'll notice that the pronoun her is used twice here. And of course we know that the her is referring to the city. Often cities are referred to by the feminine pronoun. And so we have the Lord speaking here, of Zion it shall be said. And the Lord's not speaking, but the psalmist is speaking of the Lord and of Zion. And so this falls right in place with verse 4. I will make mention of, and then of Zion it shall be said. So there's a comparison here. So he's talking about Rahab, Babylon, Philistia, Tyre, Ethiopia. And we talked about all those 5 places yesterday. But now we come back to Zion. So he just took a little break. The city of our God was mentioned in verse 3. Now we come back to Zion here in verse 5. Of Zion it shall be said, this and that man were born in her. Now we had at the end of verse 4, this man was born there. However, in verse 5, of Zion it shall be said, this and that man were born in her. So let me ask the question, where were you born? Well, I could tell you where I was born. And of course, I was there when it happened, but I don't remember it. But I have the birth certificate to tell me about the place of my birth. It was in a little city in western Kentucky. And so I have that information. But what about my second birth? Where was I born the second time? Because remember, we're thinking, at least the church is thinking about the born-again experience. There's a place where I was born physically, but there's also a place where I was born spiritually. And that wasn't any place here on this earth, because my spiritual birth is something that happened to me apart from. He called me out of all those places, and he's called me unto himself. And so my born-again experience is rooted in all that the Lord God has done through me, through and by his Son, Jesus Christ. So there was a man born there in these cities, but he's calling us out of the world. So of Zion it shall be said, this and that man were born in her. So my second birth is registered in the city of Zion because I am a child of God. And this is the place where he has set his name. He loves the gates of Zion more than all the dwellings of Jacob. And so everyone who comes to him in faith, that's their birthplace. That's their birthright. And the highest himself shall establish her. That is, this city who has a future, looking forward to a future where the Lord is going to establish her forever on this earth. All right, well, join me again tomorrow. We're going to look at verses 6 and 7 here on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. For more fresh and delicious Bible studies, podcasts, books, and more, check out the Bible Bistro online and on YouTube. Join me again next time for Daily Dose Radio.